Have you just bought your very first Corydoras? Not sure how to keep it? This video is for you.
Hello everybody, it's Tim from Planet Corydoras, here to give you a guide on how to keep Corydoras, the beginner's guide. This, for some people who experience, you might already know a lot of this information, but this is really designed at those people who are making their first steps into the world of fish keeping, perhaps in general, and then also looking to get their very first Corydoras fish. So let's go through some of the history behind the Corydoras so you understand a little bit more behind them, and then some of their physical characteristics and features. So the history, where do they come from? Well, the Corydoras comes from the Amazon area, so they are spread right amongst all the river basins around there. That's a huge area, and so we have been lucky enough for nature to make changes, through natural selection, so you get a different variation in the size of the Corydoras, the colours. Some of them are just fantastic. They're all nature's sort of blessing to us, really. So you will be able to go into many of your local fish shops and see many different species there. And if you're interested to know about some of them, take a look on our website at planetcorydoras.com, and that will give you a good idea of what is out there. But there's literally somewhere near 500 odd species. A lot of them are still undescribed to science as well. So when they're in the Amazon, what are they doing? Well, these little fish, as you're probably well aware, have some barbels on the front of their face, and they use those to dig down into the substrate and look for anything tasty down there. They're very much a protein-based food. What you'll also notice is every now and again they'll rush up to the top of the water surface and break the water surface, and they'll take a great big gulp of air. That's because they have a type of lung which does allow them to breathe air. Sometimes when the water quality has gone low, or it's just a difficult situation to be in, they'll take that gulp of air. It really helps them. But you'll see it naturally. They do it all the time within the aquariums. So you might even see them dancing up behind me every now and again. That's something not to be concerned about. Then did you know that Corydoras can blink? You'll see that if you study them very closely. They'll look with their eye, and it will appear as if they're blinking. Of course, they don't have eyelids, that's not quite the case, but they're able to roll their eye in a certain way, so it looks like they're winking at you, literally. Gives it a great character to the fish, but don't be too surprised by that. The other thing is maybe a little bit scary for some, but do you know that Corydoras are a venomous fish? Surprised? Well, it's a case that within some of their spines on their fins, they act like a little injection needle, and it can give a sting similar to like a bee. I personally haven't been stung by one, but that's what I'm told. It's something similar to that. It can reasonably painful. They use that in the wild in case they're being eaten by a predator. They'll stick out all their fins as much as possible, and they can get a jab into one of the fish to help protect themselves. But in general, Corydoras are a very calm and relaxed fish, and you won't see, they won't attack anyone whatsoever. They're more worried about being the prey themselves, and that's why they also have great big armor plating. They're not scaleless fish, as some people think. A lot of people have a lot of concerns when they're treating them for something that they're scaleless fish. That's not the problem. They just have big chunky armor plates, and if you ever get to hold one, you'll feel that they are sturdy as anything, and that's to stop obviously a predator from really being able to do any damage to them. And I know recently there's been some experiments done by some Thai scientists which have involved some large predator fish like piranhas to try and attack the fish to see what actually happens, and they can see that the piranhas really struggle to do any damage to the Corydoras, and they're able naturally in the wild, they might take try and attempt bite, but they can just swim straight away. So that gives you an idea of some of their physiological characteristics of the fish and where they come from. So we want to obviously set their tanks up as much their natural environment as possible. I always encourage that. Try and replicate the Amazon. I know that's pretty difficult in a small tank, but you want to do best for the fish. Okay, they will thank you for it with some amazing behaviour. So just do yourself and them a favour by trying to get it as natural as possible for them. So let's talk about some of their requirements. So the first thing, think about the size of their tanks. Okay, the minimum I would recommend for Corydoras is around 30 litres, and that is definitely thinking about some of the smaller species out there, like the Pygmaeus, the Hestetus. They're ones which will probably be okay in a small tank. Some people keep them maybe a little smaller, but you've got to be really knowing what you're doing and spot on with those water conditions to get them right. So aim for something above 30 litres. Realistically, if this is one of your first time keeping fish, the bigger the tank, normally the better the tank, because you're going to be able to keep the water parameters that much better. So 50 litres, something like that would be pretty good. For those in US system, that's around 14 gallons, something around there. Let's talk around then the filters. So they're not overly a messy fish, so they won't produce huge amounts of ammonia, and that's what the filter is obviously trying to get rid of in its first stages of the filtering. So you don't have to put in a great big external filter or anything like that on them. I personally hugely recommend the traditional sponge filter. It's so simple, it's so easy to maintain. It's just a case of giving it a wash out in the aquarium water. When it starts to get a bit full, give it a couple of squeezes. That's it, back on, done. And they're as cheap as anything. You can pick them up just for a few dollars, a few pounds, and you go from there. And they can do a reasonable size tank, and you can stagger them and put multiple in your tank as well, if you feel that you need more filtration within a system. Then let's talk about some of their water characteristics, what they require really. So temperature, there is a wide variety. Obviously some are going to be in much colder areas of the Amazon, some are going to be much warmer areas of the Amazon. Traditionally speaking, the lowest is somewhere around 20 degrees Celsius, something in Fahrenheit, I'll tell you soon. And they go up to some around 28 Celsius, but those are the sort of extremes, and only certain species will probably like those temperatures. More than normal is probably around about 24 Celsius, something like that. That's quite the norm. But again, you can check the website under the species you keep, and that will give you an idea of their temperatures which they would like. Now, let's talk about the water chemistry. As with any fish, you want to keep it as clean as you possibly can. You have the other things other than just temperature, which is pH. Most of them will like something around 7. Some will go much lower again. Some will go a little bit higher. Check out the website on your species, and that will give you a rough idea. For most people, 7 is probably about the norm as well, so they're not too difficult from that point of view. Then you have other things like the water hardness, the GH and the KH. Again, just avoid the extremes. You're probably looking somewhere around 6 for both of those, up to about sort of 12 is probably about what they'd like. So nothing too out of the ordinary. Make sure though, as part of your maintenance to your tanks, that you do water changes. So many people fall foul here. You must do water changes regularly, as you do with any fish. So I personally do a weekly change in my tanks of around somewhere about 25-30% water change, and that's obviously using dechlorinated water. Make sure you do that. That's important as well, so the fish won't tolerate that. So keep on top of those water changes. I know some people will go 2 weeks, and if you're going on holiday, that's fine. They'll be all right for a couple of weeks. But if you want the best out of your fish, make sure you keep up those water changes. When anyone comes to me and says, I've got a problem with my fish, Tim, what do I do? Maybe one of the first things I'll say to them, do a water change. No matter what the problem is, do a water change. It will help. The fish will thank you for it. So keep up on those water changes, guys. Okay, now let's discuss around tank mates. Tank mates, aren't necessarily essential. You see in some of my tanks here, I just tend to have some Corydoras in them, but a lot of people want to keep other fish with them. I would always recommend you keep fish which are gentle and docile like the Corydoras. So think about things like your Plecs. They work quite well together. Think of some of your Tetras. Again, very happy. The Corydoras won't touch any of them whatsoever. You've got to be more concerned about what's going to try and attack the Corydoras. So, when you start getting into a bit more feisty into barbs, some will probably be okay, some won't, and some of it's the temperament of that particular fish and the grouping. So just be, a bit more cautious around those types of fish. But the Tetra and so forth, you really can't go too wrong with them. I also recommend shrimp. Particularly the ones like cherry shrimp, which are probably the most common within your local fish shop as well. They go hand in hand great. The shrimp will breed like little rabbits, to be honest. The Corydoras won't touch them whatsoever. And then in a reciprocal way, when the Corydoras breed, the shrimp will quite often clean the eggs for you as well. So that's a really nice relationship the two species have together. So that's a big plus. So tank mates. Now we'll move on to a bit of a difficult conversation. I know some people will find some hard, but around substrates. So what substrate to put them on? Most people, when they go to their fish shop, get their first tank, they're going to get some gravel, some very coarse gravel, because that tends to be the cheapest. It might be in your mind the prettiest, that sort of stuff, and people will say it's the easiest to maintain, that sort of stuff. Personally, it's a no-no for me. In the wild, generally, they tend to live on a sand substrate. Throw in a little bit of light vegetation perhaps, but they don't tend to go on the gravel. Many people will keep them on gravel, and they will say they're very successful on gravel, and that's fine. But if you want natural behaviour, go with sand, and I'm talking sort of river type sand. Now, a lot of people use play sand and so forth, but I personally will actually get the river sand myself. It's a one-time cost, so it's not hugely expensive for you. And you will then be thanked by seeing how they forage through the sand, sift the sand out through their gills. It's just a pleasure to watch. When they're on gravel, you won't get that. And then what you'll tend to find is the barbels can get damaged from the gravel. They get sort of sharp bits on them if the gravel is not nice and smooth. So that can cause infections potentially. It can also cause other problems where food has fallen between the gravel and the Corydoras can't get down to it, so it tends to rot, and then you get problems with your water quality issues and so forth. So again, my best bet, go with sand first time. It's very easy also to maintain. You can vacuum it very easily. The rubbish tends to sit on the top. It doesn't sink down into the sand. You don't have to have huge thick lumps of sand either. You just want enough so the Corydoras can dig its nose into the sand. Sort of half an inch, a few centimetres at most. It doesn't need to be a lot. So go with that one. Then plants. Yep, they all like a few plants in there. They sometimes like to spawn on the plants as well. I tend to keep a lot of moss in my tank. It's so easy to keep. I'm not the best keeper in the world of plants myself, but some anubis, things like that. That's all fine for the fish. They won't eat the plants in any way. What you might find, they might dig up the roots a little bit. Personally, say I haven't had the problem, but I know other people who have. So that's the plant side of things. Okay, and then I'll move on to feeding the Corydoras. So feeding Corydoras, again, people aren't aware of what their requirements are, but like I said at the beginning of the video, they do eat protein-based food, i.e. that's little insects and things which are within the water, fall into the water. They will go along and clean it up and eat whatever is on the floor. And protein is their diet predominantly. You will see a few of them if you put in like some vegetables for your plex, you might see a couple of them have a little nibble on it, and that's fine. But it's not their primary food source. So don't give that to them all the time, and don't just give them algae wafers like you do to the plex as well. It's just not appropriate food for them. They'll just won't grow to their full potential. You won't get the normal sort of characteristics from them, and some of them in the worst case scenario will eventually begin to starve as well. So make sure you're looking at protein-based diets. If you look at our website, we've got a good list of food out there, which I've personally used and would recommend, so feel free to take a look. So as my final point, I'd just like to talk about Corydoras and the number of fish that you need to have within your tank. Now, Corydoras are a schooling fish. There's no two ways around that. They like their own kind and are happy with as many of them as possible. Okay, but as a general rule, I will say I'd always like to buy 6 of that species of Corydoras. You'll see a lot more natural behaviour, but obviously always more the merrier. Don't be tempted to buy, a couple of a species you see one week hoping to get 4 another week or something like that, because you might not see that species again potentially. So don't fall into that trap. And what I would also say is some people tend to get individual species. So they might get like an Aeneas, a gold laser, something else, because they like the variety. And I get that. That does look nice. But the fish won't interact in quite the same way. Having those other Corydoras are better than nothing, don't get me wrong, but when you get multiple species in a tank, maybe 6 of each, you'll see how they tend to split up and stay in their own school. They don't really like to interact too much, so just bear that in mind. The more the merrier. Make sure your tank can take it though, obviously. Don't overstock your tank, but it also is that much more of a pleasure to watch. Okay, well, that brings me really to the end of my video on how to basically keep Corydoras. I hope you have enjoyed it. Please ask questions, because I'm all about helping people, so ask whatever you might need. I will do my best to respond to you. Please take a look at our Facebook group, Planet Corydoras. Just do a search for that. You can join up. We're 20,000 people. There's a lot of experience in there, and we're all there to help each other. So feel free to post in the group as well, and take a look at the website. They're all good areas of knowledge. Please also subscribe to the channel. That really, really helps us out and keeps us what we're doing here. And let me know if any further videos you'd be interested in seeing in the comments. Thank you so much. Take care and good fish keeping.